Hey, film friends, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film, a podcast where we break down movies with some of my closest friends and special guests. But today I'm alone again, and I'm back to talk about a long-awaited sequel, a film that has more than a little bit of the original's DNA in its bloodstream. But let's dig in, guys. It's Ridley Scott's Gladiator II. Okay, so the original Gladiator and now a sequel. 24 years apart, okay? The original Gladiator comes out in the year 2000. It wins Best Picture. And it is stunning in so many ways. Actually, just revisiting that puppy, there are some things that you pick up along the way here. So, like, for instance, Russell Crowe, just transcendent in that movie. Big iconic speechifying. He's not of the like six-pack completely ripped variety of like 300 or modern action. It's more of the like brawny, beefy thing that he's got going on. Connie Nielsen's great. Joaquin Phoenix at the beginning of his rise. And really just, epic blockbuster filmmaking from that era. Very little CGI. And I think the thing about all of that is it kind of marks a turning point for films where we're moving into increased CGI, we're moving into increased franchise mode. You got Spider-Man in 2002, you've got the Marvel stuff in 2008. I mean, you got all these things kind of kicking in. Lord of the Rings is right after that. So this one kind of stands as like a bastion at the end of those things. So the question becomes, what about this new guy? How does it stack up? So I think the first thing is like after the original film was released, there was script work going into a sequel almost immediately after. So this is something that had many iterations of the screenplay for over 20 years before we finally got this thing. In fact, it's a lot. This marks at least the second and maybe more of these older filmmakers finally getting their long gestating projects to the big screen. I'm, of course, talking about Coppola's Megalopolis as well. And how do we say this? Unfortunately, neither of these films are as good as the directors in their heyday, right? I mean, that's just factual. But we're going to get there. We're going to break all that stuff down. So... and we will talk about the ways that this film is not that film. But what's intriguing is that this one is so similar in story and structure to the original. Okay? So almost so similar that I don't need to do much with plot. I'll do a little bit for you guys, but there's just not much you really need to get going here. So all that to say... what's it a story about? Well, first of all, I'm always advocating don't watch trailers. And I would say in this film, if you can avoid the stuff before walking in, I think it's a richer watching experience. Although within the first 20 minutes, you're probably going to be figuring out what's going on here. But anyway, the plots of Gladiator and Gladiator II are essentially about Rome, with a capital R, going out, conquering kingdoms, bringing in slaves, sticking them in an arena, which offers entertainment for the power-hungry people at the top. You've got corrupt emperors, you've got senators, you've got sort of social allegory about our current political times in the case of the original, maybe less so in the case of this one. You got all those things going on. And at the beginning at the centerpiece of all of that is a warrior, a commander in the case of Maximus Decimus Aurelius. Meridius, I'm sorry. You get all of those things, and it's all about fighting for freedom, right? And I think a thematic unifying whole, certainly of the first film, but even more, even not more so, but it's here in this one too, is avenging family, right? So, yeah, that's the basics of plot. Now, thematics, a couple things. One, I just said it. Avenging the family is certainly a theme that is common to both of these films. And it's carried through dastardly acts happening to family members. I'll leave it at that. This movie literally says, there's a line of dialogue that says, violence is the universal language, and I choose rage. So I think those themes are at play here. Violence, revenge, violence as spectacle, and bigger questions about, do we give Rome back to the Senate? Do we give Rome back to the people? Are the emperors worthy of being in charge? All those sorts of things. So that's all going on there. But what I want to talk to you guys about in terms of thematics is Virgil. What you say, Nick? Virgil? Yeah. There is a quote the first time that Paul Mescal's character meets the emperors, Joseph Quinn, and of Stranger Things fame, and then Fred Hechinger from, I guess let's just say White Lotus fame, is they are, how do we say this? Rather effeminate, effete, maybe ridden with syphilis, quite possibly, and they're corrupt in the worst ways, and rather inept as leaders. That's all that's going to play forward. So after the end of the dream of Marcus Aurelius from the original film, we're fast forwarding 16 years, and now we've got these two tool sheds kind of leading things down more dastardly plots. So Mescal meets these guys, and they ask him a question, and he at first appears to be silent, but then he opens his mouth, and what he does is he quotes a couple lines from Virgil's Aeneid. I believe I have it here. The gates of hell are open night and day. Smooth the descent and easy is the way. But to return and view the cheerful skies, in this the task and mighty labor lies. And so Quinn's like, ooh, is this guy threatening me? And everyone else is like, cool, let's quote some Roman stuff. But there's actually something interesting going on here thematically, and I will be your Collider article right now and tell you about it. Virgil's Aeneid is a fantastic work of sort of epic poetry alongside it's commissioned probably by Emperor Augustus for Virgil to write a kind of companion piece to Homer's Odyssey or Iliad. And it basically talks about the journey of Aeneas, the warrior who survives, I believe it's the Trojan battle, and has to journey with his men into Italy, and then eventually becomes the founding of Rome. So, but in the process of doing that, he at one point has to descend into the underworld and then come back out of that. And that's what this is referencing. So, and we get this in the very beginning of the movie. Here's a little spoiler. If you don't want anything spoiled, this is in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Then fast forward about 30 seconds. Mescal's wife is killed by an arrow. And he literally goes down to the river Styx, sees Chiron there about to sort of transport her across the river to, the Elysian Fields or wherever. And so he just wants to go then, but she's like, I'll wait for you. And so the whole point is that all of this, the Aeneas it's all about family devotion, duty, honor, all those things. So I think that frames Mescal's journey. Now, everything I just said is pretty cool and profound. The trouble is that none of that is on the screen, hardly. Almost none of that is on the screen. What do we have instead? Well, we've got spectacle, right? I mean, look, nobody does scope and scale like this guy. You can go, we'll leave a link for you to check out my review on Napoleon. Ridley does big well. That is his gift. I mean, I would argue his earlier gifts with films like Blade Runner and the original Alien is about just sort of, he literally wrote the visual language on sci-fi filmmaking. after Kubrick and things like that. We could get into all of that. But this is what this guy still can do well in his 80s. And this is a movie that is not nearly, has none of the seriousness of the original, hardly. It's silly. It's inane. But it is fun. It is. And so all the below the line stuff, guys, I mean, cinematography, production design, costumes, and really just epic scale stuff is in some ways as good as the original. I will talk about one way in which I believe it is not, hint, special effects. But in general, it is. So below the line, you're going to get it with a Ridley vehicle. The question becomes, is this as good? It's silly, it's diverting. Is it as good? The answer is no. And here's why. Let me give you a couple things. Well, first of all, let's talk about some good things. I would say I was happy to be back in this world. Again, nobody does scale and scope like this guy. Every single hand-to-hand battle scene in this movie, I think, is awesome. I mean, aside from the pow, sound effects, it's visceral, and because the filmmaking has improved in the 25 years, it's gripping and thrilling and exquisitely violent. But that stuff is good. All of the rest is not. Like, there is what the frick is he fighting in the beginning? Hell CG ape dogs? Feral baboons? It's ridiculous, guys. Like, we get a flood in the Colosseum later in the film. Cool, that actually happened, supposedly. But guess what didn't happen was them somehow piping in 12 freaking giant sharks. I mean, it's just absurd. Like, anytime he's fighting real people or real things in the arena, then it's great. And that's part of what made the first film so great. I mean, look, there's a CG tiger in the first movie, but the CG in this movie is far more expansive, far more utilized, and I think actually like less not only less meaningful, but like less convincing, honestly. So it's kind of a wild thing. So that's that. You got all of that stuff going on. What else is good? Denzel. Every time this dude is around, the film comes to life. It hums. And I partially like that because he's just playing, dude. Dude's chewing scenery. He's playing in the sandbox. He's creating this sort of convincing, probably bisexual, interesting power play who's setting up chess pieces on the board to make moves. Okay? That stuff is good. And where he ends up is also good. So I think, in many ways, this is Denzel's movie. The trouble with that is that Denzel actually takes over the movie. He takes it and he just rips it right out from under Mescal. The movie actually moves away from Mescal for like 30 or 40 minutes. And I think that is a bigger issue with the picture. It's kind of like 5 different movies. And it's not hierarchical, like here's the big story, here's a sub-story, here's a sub-story. They're all kind of on the same plane. And I think that becomes problematic. So you got Denzel's movie, which is all about a former slave trying to, in some ways, become emperor, but almost like a Ledger kind of chaos agent, like a Joker sort of character, like really just see Rome burn kind of dude. Then you got a separate story about 2 nutso emperors, Gaeta and Caracalla. We already talked about them. You've got Connie Nielsen and Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal is fantastic. The dude has nothing to do in this movie. I mean, nothing. Like, it is kind of shocking. I don't know if there were rewrites that trimmed some of his fat down on the character or what. You could have easily cut his character out and put his dialogue meaningfully into other characters and gone in a different place. I'm not disinterested in Acacius as this basically he functions as sort of a conscience to the film, which is, I've been doing all these legions of conquering for these dumbass emperors, but now I'm kind of done with it. I'm sick of watching women and children weep for their fallen men in these armies we conquer. Like I really had a vision for a greater Rome. That's all awesome stuff. The problem is Mescal's already kind of there. Connie Nielsen is already kind of there, and Pedro is like, he's just kind of in this middle ground. And then you've got Connie Nielsen and Mescal's story, which we will get to here in just a second. And my point is, that's like 5 movies, dude. And so I've heard a lot of people say, well, this is the, like the biggest thing I've said is like, oh yeah, Gladiator II. It's the same damn movie. Like I've heard people just shouting about this stuff. And it's not. It is, but it's not. It's structurally, pacing, story, thematic, like a lot of those are the same, but it's trying to be different. The trouble is, in the ways that it tries to be different, it loses focus. It loses steam. And you're left with like a lot of hanging plot threads, minor characters that just don't really matter. And the movie we got is maybe less interesting than the movie that I wanted to see. Like if it was just Denzel's movie of trying to use the Gladiator, maybe that's a cool flick, The movie about sort of giving power back to the Senate like Aurelius wanted, maybe that's a better flick too. But, like that's the thing I would say is that Crow is transcendent. Mescal is not. No, the speechifying, it just doesn't work. I mean, there's a line, I wrote it down here. He says, where we are, death is not. And where death is, we are not. Like, what the actual fuck, dude? Are you kidding? Really? That's the speech you gave to your guys? I mean, you gave them a tautology from formal logic class? Like, what? Of course. If you're alive, you're not dead. A is not equal to B. A and not B. I don't, like, I got nothing, man. But the thing is, that's everybody, like, I heard people taking a ride taking some shots at Mescal on this one. Here's the thing, guys. Like, I will ride for Mescal. I think the dude is awesome in Normal People, that Hulu show with Daisy Edgar Jones. I think he is the great, sad dad with lots of introspection in After Sun, one of my favorite films of the decade. You can check out my video on that, or my video on All of Us Strangers, where he plays another tremendous character of depth and emotion. So, could he do this role? Is he miscast? Maybe. And in fact, probably. But this movie does him no favors anywhere. I mean, nothing. There's no favors done to him. He, you don't write him good speeches and then you complain that he doesn't give as good a speech as Russell Crowe. Like, sorry. Come on. You put him in a movie where he's 1/5 of the main plot and he's sitting in a cell for 30 minutes? Like, come on. So I can't hang all of this on him. The movie tries to go in a lot of different directions, and as it does, it really loses focus. There's way too many special effects. It doesn't have the heft of the original. So again, you're going to see my score come out a little higher than you probably think with all the negative things I've said. It's really fun. It's fun, and it is good in the big screen because that's what Ridley does. But is there like nothing? Is there rich nutrients here above sort of like an empty bag of potato chip calories? No, not really. Even though I was happy to be in the world. And I think in some ways there is a really good movie here. I think the complaint would be that maybe Ridley has gotten a little lazy with his screenplays. So that brings me to the end. I want to talk about one final thing, which is to say the way that the Lucius, Connie Nielsen's character are commingled. If you don't want any spoilers about that, now's the time to skip off, finish it, and come on back. Okay, here's the problem, guys. By making Lucius, her son, and more importantly, Maximus's son from the first film, you're basically, I can't believe I'm using this word because I am not a comic book guy at all. You're basically retconning the original film. And in so doing it, kind of making it worse And that is problematic to me. Problematic because I don't look. Can you get to the place where they're hinted at a love affair between the two of them in the first film? Absolutely. But if you go back and watch, there are lines of dialogue that would have probably taken place quite differently if she knew he was his son. If she knew that Lucius was Maximus's son. It's hinted at, and there was some, I'm sure, like in the early internet boards, there were people like, wait a minute, I bet it's his son. They both have an 8-year-old kid. Wow, shocker. Like all of that. But the problem is, like the dialogue would have been set up differently from the original film if this was the case, has the right conning. And B, it makes Maximus a way less honorable person because he was married. Like the whole point of the first film is that he's vengeance for his wife and his kid, like hanging, all that stuff. And now it's like, well, actually he was like kind of shacking up with Connie Nielsen. Can you blame him? Like, okay, cool. But now that statue of him as the war hero takes on a little less positive impact there. So anyway, that's my thoughts about the ending. That is my general conclusion about the entire thing. A great time at the movies, mostly. Great hand-to-hand fighting, not good special effects. Decent performances, but there's so much going on in different ways that we really never get to see the best version of this film. So to conclude my FOF rating, I am going to give this a 2.8 out of 5 stars. I had it at 3, but the more I thought about the critiques, I was like, I got to dip slightly under that. I think it's a better than okay movie, but it is not a good one. And so, hey, if you have thoughts, let me know your comments. Let me know what you thought. What did you think of Virgil's Aeneid? Did you like that bit? Mescal's performance. Has Ridley completely gone crazy and over the hill? All the thoughts you got, send them my way. Until next time, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film. Stay firm, my friends.